It's episode 150. It is a special one. We've taken some of the snippets of each of these episodes for you to be able to listen to. So it is a very different podcast. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm really looking forward to being able to share some, like I say, phenomenal wisdom, stories, insights with you over the coming week. Hello, and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. As you may have seen, things are a little bit different. So first of all, visually, you may have seen that we've got a brand new podcast cover in terms of the artwork, because earlier on in 2023, we did a rebrand, and I did a rebrand as a company, and I haven't been able to get back to doing the podcast because we've just been so busy. There's been some really exciting stuff that's happened this year, which some of you may well be aware of. The big thing in 2023 was that my book, North Star Thinking, came out. And North Star Thinking, Master Your Mindset and Live a Life You Love, which we will have some episodes on in the not too distant future. But now we're back, and things are going to be a little bit different. You'll notice there's some new things that we're introducing. We've got some phenomenal guests lined up for the podcast now, and I just cannot wait to share some of the knowledge and wisdom and stories of some of these guests with you. So as you may have also have seen, this is not the usual length podcast. So it's episode 150. It is a special one. And for that reason, what we've actually done is we've gone and found what we think are some of the best parts of the podcast in the 149 episodes that we've had to date. And we've taken some of the snippets of each of these episodes for you to be able to listen to. So it is a very different podcast. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm really looking forward to being able to share some, like I say, phenomenal wisdom, stories, insights with you over the coming weeks now, because we are going to be back to doing a new podcast and releasing a new podcast each week. So we're going to get started. We're going way back to episode number 1, which was creating your vision. One of the best ways that I've ever heard anybody describe why having an end goal is so important is by Tony Robbins, who, if you're listening to this, you may be familiar with, and he defines not having a goal as having an ultimate goal as having Niagara syndrome. So I'm going to read this out for you word for word, because I think it's phenomenal. Life is like a sprinting river, and most people jump frog onto the river without ever deciding where they want to end up. They set off on a journey without even a little spade work, and in a short period of time they find themselves caught up in the current affairs, current fears, current challenges. When they come to a fork in the river, they don't consciously decide where they want to go or what is the right direction for them. They merely go with the flow. They become part of the mass of the people who are directed by the environment instead of by their own values, and as a result they feel out of control. They remain in this unconscious state until one day the sounds of raging water awakens them, and they discover that they're 5 feet from Niagara Falls in a boat with no oars. At this point they say, "Oh shoot," but by then it's too late. So by having that goal and having the North Star, what it enables you to do is make better decisions that are going to serve you for the long term. And when we come to talk about experiences a little bit later on, you'll understand the reason why. In episode 5 and 6, I had Michael Heppel, and the episode is called How to Be Brilliant. And in this clip, we speak about a key life lesson that Michael had learned over the years. What I also love that you've done in the book, and this is in the edition that I've got, is that you've also put brilliant life lessons. So I'm assuming that these are based on your personal experiences. Yeah, they are based on your personal experiences, aren't they? Yeah, and I remember now. So you share little mini stories of what the key valuable lessons are, and then the story of how you came about that. Yeah. So for those of you that are listening, it's things like, if you don't love it, don't do it, and you've got a little story about that. You'll meet people who want to help you and give you a chance, let them, and then a little story about that. Is there any real standout life lessons for you that really?
I think one of the key things for me was the difference between knowing something and doing something. And that has been such a big lesson of mine. I became an absolute personal development junkie. I was going on courses all the time. I set this goal, I'm going to read a book a week for the rest of my life and all that type of stuff. But what I found, Will, was I was gathering all this knowledge, but not always applying it. And I would know it, and I could advise other people, "Oh, you know what, you should do this," or "Have you read this?" Or I could quote people all over the place, and I'd stop doing some of the real basics. which is when these challenges happened with Christine and I earlier on. And so the secret isn't the knowing, the secret's in the doing is something I absolutely live by. I test myself on that all the time. Am I doing this, or am I thinking about it? Am I telling other people it, or am I living it myself? And you'll know when you sit down and you coach somebody, there are times when, you know, you'll be halfway through a coaching process, someone will have an aha moment, and then they'll say, oh, here's what I'm going to do. And I sit there and I'll go, my goodness, you're better than me. If you do that, you're a better person than me. You're a stronger person than me. And I'm all encouraging them, and I'll leave and I'll review my notes afterwards, and I'm thinking, Michael, get your finger out. You know what? You're the teacher here. You should be better.
In episode 15 and 16, I had my good friend Ryan Pinnock on the show, and the episode was about becoming a super genius. And in this clip, we spoke about what alchemy is and how it can help us. Alchemy. For people that aren't familiar with alchemy, maybe they've heard of the term turning lead into gold, which is a great metaphor for essentially what we're doing. What is alchemy, and how do we apply it from a personal development context?
Yeah, amazing. So well done for picking up on this. I'm really impressed. So you've done some great research, and it's going to really benefit your audience. So thanks for doing that. So alchemy, just metaphorically, is turning lead to gold, which is what you've mentioned. So what that means literally, and my gosh, this is like the one thing that people comment on when they come to my workshops, particularly people who've done lots of training before. They've gone, gee whiz, this is the thing that's missing in my life, is the ability to take any form of tension and turn it into inspiration, intuition, and imagination. So imagine, right, being very emotional or having negative emotions or being stressed or having any form of tension. And then remembering that energy cannot be created or destroyed, taking that energy and instead of getting rid of it, maybe through exercise, which isn't a bad thing, but meditating or some dysfunctional stuff, like I used to drink and drugs and all that rest of it that goes with it. Instead of getting rid of that tension, what if we harness that tension, that energy, as a form of creativity to energize us, to motivate us, to then push ourselves to a new level? So, you know, if you think of J.K. Rowling, what a beautiful story, right? So she was in a tremendous amount of pain after her divorce. You can listen to her story on YouTube. And she turned that pain into a book, which has done very well for herself. So what most people do, and I think there is a time and a place for therapy and healing and all of that's really important. But when you want to create what you want, emotions aren't such a bad thing, actually, particularly negative emotions. In fact, it was Napoleon Hill who, in his book, Think and Grow Rich, wrote that the number one reason people fail is they have an inability to deal with their negative emotions. So we look at performing artists. We look at what's happened with Caroline Flack recently, which is tragic. We aren't, as human beings, taught to master our emotions. In fact, our emotions master us. And Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it directs your life and you will call it fate. But what he's saying there is that all our past experiences are creating emotional reactions, fear, and then we think that fear is real. We think the danger is real, and then we act on it. But what alchemy does is alchemy transforms all forms of tension into love, into creativity, into purpose, into fulfillment, into wealth. You know, I've written some of my best Facebook ads when I was really pissed off after a Liverpool game because they've probably lost or something. Does that make sense? I know that sounds silly, but in the past I would have drank, you know, Liverpool, rubbish, all that kind of stuff. And I use that as a silly example, but my point is, you know, emotions are inspiration for creativity, but we don't use them for that reason. So alchemy is the transformation of all forms of tension into creativity.
In episode 22, we spoke about how to heal illness and disease fast with Yvette Rose. And in this clip, we talk about how diseases stem from trauma. In your opinion, I mean, we've mentioned trauma a lot, we've mentioned stress a lot. Are the majority, if not all, illnesses and diseases and addictions, is the root cause always trauma and stress?
It depends. Trauma in the sense of emotional trauma and physical trauma, yes.
So either emotional or physical trauma, or what causes that? Yeah.
Yes. However, now if you're looking at someone that's born with an ailment, then of course we're going to be looking at what happened in the womb.
Yeah.
Which I spend a whole day on in my live events. I spend a whole day on that because it's so incredibly important. People thinking, well, no, the womb's fine. The placenta protects the baby. I'm like, no, it doesn't. And I was fighting so hard against it and through so much criticism until one day I found a scientist that actually said, yes, the protein in the lining of the placenta absorbs the mother's stress and it affects the child. And I'm like, yes, see? So
I love that. I always love chatting with you, and we've had numerous conversations. And I remember when we were speaking before, you spoke about ghosts in your genes. And I thought that was such a
documentary. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's such a thing, because I always had thought, no, I'm just how I am. I'm born with this sort of blank page, and then everything that I do is what I do, what I create, my own belief systems, and there's no trauma or stress from my parents or whatever before. And then one day it just dawned on me. I was like, how stupid of me to think like that. It's none of us think twice about the fact that you look at a person and then you look at their parents, you go, oh my God, yeah, you're the spitting image of your mum or your dad or your aunt or your uncle, or your grandparents. It's absolutely obvious. And obviously the reason that's the case is because at a cellular level, those cells have been sort of passed down, and that makeup, that process is still the same. And it just dawned on me. I was like, of course you must be able to carry those belief systems, that trauma, that stress at a cellular level. When you think of it like that, it's obvious, isn't it? In episode 24 and 25, we broke up the episode Unstoppable into two parts with the legend that is Paul Mort, and we spoke about how to get your shit together in this clip. Not that long ago, you said, I am world class at helping married men that need to get their shit together. Yep. And obviously you've worked with tens of thousands of people now, yep. Tens of thousands of men specifically. Yep. To do that. Because, like I say, you've experienced a lot of what they want. It's really interesting you mentioned about purpose, because I was going to say the thing that sort of you tearing that story there, I said that what you were lacking then was purpose. You had all these opinions of what you thought life would look like for you. I refer to a lot of people having their North Star, and I talk about North Star trajectory, so they've got clarity, they can work towards that. And that was something that you'd got to that point, that had been done. Now what?
I didn't know what was next.
So what's the mission? What's the purpose now? What is it that makes you not go back into those things? I don't mean the actions, but I mean the drive, the intent, the will. What is the thing that you strive for?
Impacting men, and more importantly, and I only figured this out last year, is that I love impacting men. I love hearing about their results, whether that's with their bodies, whether that's with their mental health, whether that's with their business. But I love it when I hear from the families. Blows me mind. That's the shit that like fills my heart. And that's not, I wouldn't say that's the route that I go down when it comes to my marketing. People don't kind of get that. They're like, that's not the problem that they really want to solve there and then. Usually it's something else. But when I hear from like someone's wife who's like, you saved my fucking marriage, dude. You saved my husband. I got my husband back. Or I spoke at an event with Simon Thomas of Sky Sports last year. And the guy that ran the event, his mum and dad came up to me and said, Paul, thank you for bringing my son back. We now have a relationship with our son for like the first time since he was a kid.
Wow. And
that made me, I cried there and then. Or someone, at Christmas, I got a Christmas card of two lads who were thanking me for their dad. Thank you for helping my dad get my shit together. And that makes me emotional as fuck. And that's what fills my heart the most. That's probably my mission. To impact almost the world one man at a time, but really impact families. That's my thing. I don't even, that's like a side effect really of the guys getting the shit together basically.
Yeah, it's the byproduct.
And I think that's because it's the one thing that helped me get my shit together was when my wife and my Donna from the community support or suicide watch team, when she said that, when they said those things to me, I think it probably goes back to that.
So on that note then, so there's one thing, a guy reaching out and going, do you know what, Paul? Yeah, I need you to help me. I know that I'm not where I want to be right now. Yeah. But you know and I know that it takes a lot for a guy to get to that point to be able to do that. So more often than not, and there might be people that are listening to this podcast episode right now that are the family members, that are the wife, or are the brother, or are the dad, or are the mum of someone that's in that place right now. So what's your advice to them about a family member or stuff?
That is a great question, because I often get women who message me saying, my husband needs your program, can you send me the details? I'm like, no, I'm not sending you the details. He needs to ask for the details, because he's just going to feel like you're attacking him. If not, he's going to feel attacked. So essentially, for me, for those people in that situation, I'm like, you've just got to be the lighthouse for a start. I'm not taking advice from anybody that's like, I'm not going to take weight loss advice from someone that's fat. I'm not going to take business advice from someone that's fucking broke. Like, that's just the way it is. So often we do need to hear a voice from outside. If you've ever tried giving your fucking mum and dad weight loss advice, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're not going to take it from you. Like, they've got to hear a different voice. So my advice would be, you've got to be the lighthouse, not try and be a tugboat. I love that analogy. Don't try and be a lighthouse. Don't try and be a tugboat, just try and save people. Be the lighthouse, like lead by example, so that eventually they're like, how do I do that? So for me, you just got to keep asking questions. That's the reason for me why I'm able to, when people say you describe yourself as world class, I'm like, well, I have a strong belief in that, but it's basically down to my ability to ask world class questions. It's not me that's world class, it's the questions that I'm able to ask people, whether I'm coaching them or, this sounds crazy, but selling to them, is my ability to ask questions. So for me, you've got to develop an ability to ask questions and just be a lighthouse. It's a challenging situation to be in that, because they're going to feel like you're attacking them.
Yeah,
but essentially, be there for them when they're ready. If they're not ready, they're going to feel like attack. And when you get attacked, you defend, you try and defend.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things I always go by is that any problem, whatever, is simply an unasked or unanswered question.
Oh, I love that, bro. Yeah.
That's it.
What question you need to ask, Everyone wants the answers, but you ask a shit question, you get a shit answer.
My good friend Chris Branch on the show, and we spoke about fasting for fantastic health. And in this clip, we speak about intentional living habits for a healthier, more fulfilling life. So talking about, obviously we've touched on exercise and we've touched on nutrition. Obviously, I know you've got a keen interest in meditation and your own personal development has been sort of a big part of what you do. Clearly, you love learning, not just sort of the research and science of your industry, but personal and professional development across the board. So what would you say are some are your maybe top 3 must-do things, knowing what you know now, that you maybe didn't know 10 years ago, that if you could say to someone that's listening to this right now, look, the 3 things that I do in my life, either physically or with my diet or with my meditation or my personal development, are must-dos for you that you're doing either every day or every week, depending on how regularly you do them, that make a significant difference for you, what would you say they are?
I've created a new catchphrase recently, which is I'm passionate about intentional living. I'm passionate about using intentional living to lead a healthier life. And my biggest passion is being intentional about basically everything I do, which just I label intentional living just as asking the question, why do I do that? And going through everything in your life and just say, why do I do that? And I don't think you can be intentional without being healthy. One has to lead to the other, because if you ask, why do I do that, to everything, you'll eventually find yourself realizing that some things you're doing in your life just aren't that healthy. They're not serving you. And health also makes you more productive, which can also make you more successful. It can also make you calmer. It can also, therefore, because you're calmer, have better relationships and not snap and not be angry with the people you love and the people around you. It can make you a better leader. So health is so integral to everything that we do. So why am I telling you this? In terms of habits that help me live intentional life that therefore helps me lead a healthy life, which therefore helps me be a better leader, a better partner, a better dad, all that stuff. I have two habits that really help me be intentional. One is journaling every day, and I use a few different types of journaling. I use what I call my daily check-in, which is I do this digitally. I'm using an app called Notion, which I'm really enjoying. And I just have three or four questions, three things I'm grateful for. I have a new question that I've added recently saying, what one thing is in my control that will make my life better? I write this every day. And one quick sentence. What one thing is in my control that will make my life better? And then some most important tasks of the day. That's my check-in. But then what I also love doing, and I do this with pen and paper, is what I call monkey mind journaling. And this should be done first thing in the day. Before I do this while my phone is still on airplane mode, I sleep with my phone on airplane mode, and I monkey mind journal before I take my phone off airplane mode. So I've had no external input from social media or emails or anything. And literally, monkey mind journaling is you put your pen to paper, and whatever is in your head, you start writing. You don't have to follow on from yesterday. You don't have to ask big questions. You don't have to come up with any big revelations. You just start writing. But what's amazing is when you put no pressure on yourself and you just start writing every day, big revelations do come. And I find that they come once every 10 days or so, which is 10%, which doesn't sound much. But if you're writing every day, a big revelation that will benefit your life coming once every 10 days, that's powerful. That's a really powerful thing.
In episode 2, I spoke about the importance of identifying your values, and in this clip we're talking about utilizing the 7 levels of consciousness. In terms of taking that to the next level, so really taking this to the next level and utilizing another John DeMartini learning, is something called the 7 levels of consciousness. Okay, and the reason the 7 levels of consciousness is so important is the 7 tiers to it. So the way this works and the 7 levels are organized is the things that you value most. Sorry, if you're living to your highest values, you will be most inspired. Okay, so if you're living to your highest values, you'll be most inspired. Take the word inspired, break it down. It means in spirit or in energy. So you're most energized. If you are living, you're not living your values, you'll be living somebody else's values. And those other values will be values that have been injected or projected onto you. So that could be from parents, other family members, teachers, could be just society in general as a way of conditioning. And if you're living to values that aren't yours, then you will lack you'll lack inspiration, and you'll constantly require external motivation. So inspiration comes from within, motivation comes externally. And the beauty of living to your highest values is that you don't require external motivation. It's like a renewable, it's an untapped renewable energy source that if you use it and use it consciously, which I'll come on to explain in a moment how you do that, you can find yourself living a very fulfilled life and very rarely having to operate from pain or pleasure and experience. And you won't even have to experience pain in the way that most of us have been brought up experiencing it. In episode 4, we spoke about breaking limiting beliefs. And in this clip, we speak about the Scrooge process, which is a process that I use with pretty much every single one of my clients to create change. One of the ways that I do this with my clients is I take them through something called the Scrooge process. So if people want to create change, one of the first things that I'll do is take them through the Scrooge process. So I'll get them to identify what it is that they really want, and then ask them what it is that they know that they're doing that's preventing them from achieving what it is that they want. And then I keep drawing more and more and more of the reasons why they're doing things or not doing, or the things they're doing or they're not doing that are getting in the way. And then I take them through, like I say, what I call the Scrooge process, which is ask them what it's cost them in the past. So right now, if you've got a belief that you want to change, that you're not changing, I just want you to think for a second, what is it costing you? What has it cost you to date? What don't you have or maybe did you have that you don't have now as a result of you having this particular belief. Then I ask them how it's affecting them now. So how's it affecting them mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically? What are the consequences that you're experiencing right now as a result of you having this belief that you want to change, that you haven't changed? And then finally, I ask them what's going to happen in the future if they don't change. So if they carry on having this belief, if they carry on having this way of thinking, what's going to happen in the future? And quite often, that's enough pain to get them to then make a decision that they want to change. Because most of us, we all know someone that has had hit rock bottom. They've hit rock bottom and then they've decided to change. But you don't have to actually hit rock bottom. You can experience rock bottom as in your imagination, and that in itself can be enough to make you change. And that's one of the things that I do. I will push people to a point where there's so much pain in even thinking about that experience of what will happen, what has happened, what is happening, what will happen in the future, that they decide to make that change. So that's part of the interrupt or the leverage. So what we're effectively looking to do is, like I say, create a new pattern. And it's really important to remember that when we're looking to create a new belief, we do want to replace an old belief. Yeah, we don't just want to stop doing something, we want to replace it. I like to think of it a lot of the time like having a garden or having a garden that's got weeds in it. Right, you can chop that weed, and we all know what will happen if you chop the weed. It's just going to grow back. But you could pull the weed out, and then you've just got soil there, and eventually another weed's probably going to grow back in its place. But what we can do is we can remove the weed, we can replace it with a flower, and then we maintain the flower. We make sure that if there are any other small weeds coming through, we get them when they're small. We make sure that we nurture the flower, we trim it where it needs to be trimmed, and we enable it to grow into being a beautiful flower that makes the garden look wonderful. And that's really what I like to think of is we're doing with the garden of our mind when we're working with our belief system. So that's what we'd be doing to create a new pattern. Now, it's worth bearing in mind there's two types of beliefs. Okay, there's two types of beliefs. There's what I call global beliefs, which a global belief gives us a certainty of how we should feel, what we should expect from ourselves, from life, from people, and then we have rules. Okay, so a global belief is something that's sort of overarching, and then we have rules. And our rules are the beliefs that we have about what has to happen for us to feel certain ways. So, again, there's lots of different examples of this, but it's always worth bearing in mind that it can be that other people have, and this not worth just bearing in mind for you, but worth bearing in mind for other people, is that lots of people have their own sets of rules, ways of doing things. So when I spoke about values in the previous episode, if you haven't listened to it, go back to it. It's episode 2. Is I talk about means values and end values, and with beliefs it's similar. You have sort of your global beliefs, and then you have your rules. Your rules are sort of your means values, are like your means values, and your global beliefs are like your end values. In episode 34, the episode was about how to change negative emotions, and in this clip I explained the importance of the language that we use. In Sanskrit, which is ancient Indian, they have 96 words for love. In ancient Persian, they have 80. In Greek, they have 3. But in English, we only have 1. So, for example, I love my mum, but I also love Galaxy chocolate and mint choc chip ice cream. So don't you find it odd that one word can have so many different meanings? Now, if you take Eskimos, or to be politically correct, Inuits, they have 30 words for snow, because for them, it can literally be a case of life or death to have the exact information about the white stuff that they spend their life in. Now, of course, we have 1, snow, or maybe 2 if you were to say yellow snow. But all jokes aside, the choice of the language you use is vital to dealing with your emotions. And let's face it, we can experience a whole host of emotions along the emotional spectrum, and sometimes, particularly, I know myself as an entrepreneur, and many entrepreneurs, leaders, ambitious professionals that are listening to this right now can experience a whole array of different emotions in just one day. So it would definitely be useful to have a way of being able to handle them. In episode 49, I spoke about how to make tough decisions. And in this clip, we're talking about how to ensure that your values are congruent to your North Star. In order to ensure that you feel emotionally sound about the decision that you've made, there's two things that you need to do. It's a two-phase process. First of all is learning, and then the second is deciding. So learning from other people who may have been there, or get opinions from other experts on the subject. Or most importantly, learn from yourself by aligning and making sure that the decision you're making is congruent with your values, it's congruent with your North Star trajectory. As some of you may know, the first personal development book that I ever read was called The Secret, and still today it's my number one book. It's the book that gave me the biggest insights in terms of in one hit, and I absolutely loved it. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing a number of the contributors to The Secret. In episode 55, I had James Arthur Ray on the show, and we spoke about the law of attraction and the importance of redemption. And in this clip, we're talking about why the law of attraction is not working for you. There's someone right now that is maybe of the view, well, look, I've already sacrificed so much, and I'm benefiting from some of my prizes right now. These are some of my wins, and they're maybe getting that slightly overinflated ego, and to avoid them having to go through significant humbling. What could they do in that instance to humble themselves? If they're at that point, if they're listening to this right now and they maybe have got on the egotistical side, they are maybe getting a bit arrogant, what can they do to humble themselves?
Well, I think this is going to sound a bit esoteric, Will, but the thing that we have to constantly remind ourselves every single day is that we're not doing it. There's in every great tradition, name the tradition, it doesn't matter. Every great tradition tells us there's something bigger than us. And that's something bigger than us. Call it your higher conscious mind, your higher self, God, your soul, whatever, spirit. It doesn't matter what you call it. There's something bigger that works through us than anything that can come from us. And when we start to think it's coming from us, well, we're coming from a finite source. When we realize it's coming through us, then we're coming from an infinite source. And this is scientifically provable. I mean, there's 10 to 55. If you're a listener today, write down that number, 10 to the 50th power. That's the amount of energy in the 0 point field or in this particular universe. That's 10 with 55 zeros after it. Now, come down to the quantum level, and the basic building block of all creation is the atom. Atoms have a nucleus, and every atom has electrons and a proton. Well, here's what we now have proven mathematically and scientifically is that every single proton, we have trillions of cells in our body with billions of atoms within each of those cells. And every one of those atoms has a proton, and every single proton in billions of atoms in trillions of cells, there's 10 to the 55 power, 10 to the 55. So here it is. If you follow, the same power that is in the universe at large is inside of you. And when you are accomplishing things in the world, you're utilizing that universal source, and you're accessing that by getting your small self out of the way. When your small self starts to believe it's you, and look at the research. There's the rise of Superman. I can't think of the author's name right now, but it's a really great. Yeah, read his book. He talks about the flow state. My friend Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote the book Flow. What you find in every single arena, whether it's extreme athletics or extreme entrepreneurial pursuits or extreme leadership, is that you come to a point where you're in this flow state and you realize you're really kicking butt, but you also realize you're not the one doing the kicking. Because it's happening so fast, there's no way you can be doing it with your small self. And to the degree, Will, that we can stay in that place, then we become incredibly grateful. We say, hey, maybe I've got a lot going on in my business right now. I had a $10 million business, Inc. 500 company. I didn't do that. It's the power working through me that did that. It's not me. And if we can stand guard at the gate, which is often hard to do, then maybe we stay in that correct frequency. And maybe we don't have to lose as much. But let me also say this. Another law of the universe, which I'm very fond of physics, as you can probably tell, and I've studied it for over 2 decades, is that called the law of rhythm. And the law of rhythm says everything rises and falls. Seasons come and seasons go. Tide comes in, tide goes out. Everything moves in rhythms. Right now in our world, we're in a down rhythm or a winter season, but winter never lasts. Every single winter is always followed by a spring. And sometimes we have really long winters, but there's never been 2 winters in a row. So to the person who's on the top of their game right now, there's going to come a time, look at the rise and fall of nations. Everything always rises and falls. There's going to come a time where things swing backwards for you. And so that's where I said earlier, take absolute responsibility, because it's coming. Winter always comes. And so if you understand the laws and the rhythms of the universe, then you operate in concert with them and you're prepared for them and you don't get sidelined.
In episode 56, I had Maurice Goodman on the show, also from The Secret, and we spoke about the law of attraction and miracles and the power of visualization. You talk about, and it's something that's so evident, and it's been a huge part of you based on what you've said that enabled you to be able to defy all of the odds and every doctor that said that you wasn't going to be able to walk again or move again. And you did that via the power of visualization. So for you, where most people would visualize, if they're asked to visualize, they think and they just see themselves, you were what I would call in an associated state. So you would imagine yourself actually sort of putting your shoes on and doing those things, or you would see your whole body, you'd be watching yourself. Which was it?
When you were like the doctor, I would see the doctor getting close to me. I'd see his hand reaching out to me. I was seeing what was going on around me. I wasn't picturing myself out there in another dimension doing something. I'm picturing everything around me. That's how it is in real life.
Yeah. So you made it as if you were seeing it as if you were looking out of your own eyes, You
got it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm schooled in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, as most people know it. And we talk about associated and disassociated states.
Sure.
A disassociated state is seeing somewhat like you could see yourself in the future doing the thing, whereas an associated state is if you imagined your dream car, I don't know, I'm making it up. Let's say your dream car was a Ferrari. You would literally see your hands on the steering wheel, looking at it as if you were to go and sit in your car right now.
See, you're right. One of my goals, and money doesn't really mean nothing to me. I make a lot of money, but I've got something set up right now that was in about 3 years now, that I'm going to have about $3 billion in the bank. $3 billion. Now, I don't need $3 billion, but my goal all my life has been to make $1 million a week by the time I'm 75. Now I said, well, that's way too low. My goal now is to make $3 million a week. Most of that money will be put in a charity or remain in trust, where I can do a lot of stuff for other people, homeless people, donating to the kingdom of God. I'm a real strong Christian. I believe that you're put here to help other people. But I'm going to take some of that money and use it for myself now. Because if God's got a mansion for me up in the sky, which he said he does, he don't want me living in chicken coop down here. So I've got 186,000 acre ranch I want to buy in New Mexico I'm looking at.
Wow.
Little over 300 square miles. I want to build me a 20,000 square foot little cedar home on that. Overlooking a 2,000 acre lake I'm going to have dug on it. Homes around there and have staff my people that are going to run my ranch. People that work for me, run my companies. Have my own runway on there with a brand new Citation Latitude jet, brand new Gulfstream jet. Now, I was talking to a man the other day. I don't share my dreams with many people because everybody wants to pull you down. It's like a crab in the barrel syndrome. My mother used, when I was a boy, used to go crabbing. She loved to catch crabs. And she'd come home and put them in a big pot. And they'd be down the stove and they got warm and warm. They start getting, and then they start crawling out and they get out. As soon as one gets up to the top, one pulls it down. Well, that's how people are. But I had a guy the other day, I thought was a friend of mine, that's 6 months ago. And I was sharing a little bit of my dream with him. I don't usually do that. He said, well, in that little sarcastic way, well, you don't have that mansion. And you don't live in that big house yet. I said, yeah, new fella, I've got it. I pointed around. I've got it, but I just ain't moved into it yet.
Okay.
He didn't get it.
I get it. I get it. In episode 56, I had Marie Diamond from The Secret on the show, and we spoke about the law of attraction and Feng Shui and how Feng Shui benefits us. This mini series that I'm doing for our 5th anniversary, because so many of the speakers that I've been getting that have come from the book The Secret, we've spoken about the law of attraction, but you have your own specialism in regards to the world of spirituality and manifestation and the law of attraction in the form of Feng Shui, which you've been sort of a real world-class, world-leading authority in the area of Feng Shui for many, many years now. I mean, I'm running saying over 25 years. So for people that have maybe heard of Feng Shui, but they're not familiar with what it is, you have a fantastic way of taking what is quite a complex subject and explaining it in sort of a really simple, practical way. So I'd love for you to share with our listeners what that is.
Of course. So Feng Shui means literally wind and water. So it's about the flow of life. And so we all know when we are in the flow and when we feel stuck, right? So we always think it's just us, we personally, our mindset, or emotions, or actions that kind of make us feel stuck or make us feel going into the flow. But about 4,000 years ago, the Chinese understood there was another level that could help us with being in the flow or feeling stuck. And that is actually our environment, where we live, where we sleep, where we work. And so they kind of started looking for principles and ideas how to change that flow. And it's actually an energy system. So it's not a science, it's not an art. It's kind of, you can compare it with like acupuncture in a way. So if you go to an acupuncturist, he will put some needles in or will do some pressure, and then you feel like, energized. Well, Feng Shui is like the acupuncture of a home. So you kind of look, where is the energy stuck and what can you do to change that energy so you feel better where you live. And I think everybody has the feeling already. Sometimes you come to a place and you're like, oh, I can't be there. It doesn't feel great. Or it's all the time cluttered. I'm not able to make it nice and beautiful. And then there are other areas where you're like, I love being there. I love hanging out there. I mean, it's just like I could stay there forever. And it's just there's an ease to things, right? And so that's actually what Feng Shui has started understanding, that there are some principles and flow energy systems that we can actually put into an environment and then bring that in. So when we live in such a place, where we work there or we sleep there, we feel, first of all, more ease and effortless energy. We feel like there's wind behind us to move forward towards our success and abundance. We don't feel like things are heavy or blocked. We don't have to push that hard anymore. And that's kind of what Feng Shui really creates. So, but it's a very old system that till the 1980s was really only given or used by the Chinese or Chinese families in other countries. It's only in the 1980s that the first time the information came to the West, and came through Hong Kong, actually, and through Singapore and Taiwan and Malaysia, where a lot of the Chinese families had lived for a long time. after the Cultural Revolution in China, where all the feng shui masters were kind of kicked out of the country. And that information started kind of trickling into the West area. Well, now it's considered like by a lot of big companies, celebrities. And, I started playing with this work very early on. And now I see I have more than 1 million people that I have started teaching this information to. So I would say it's definitely becoming more and more an awareness that people have that their environment could really support them or could block them.
Yeah, and it's really, really interesting when you talk about certain parts of the home, and I think most of the planet have spent more time in their homes these last sort of few months. For those of you that are maybe listening to this in the future, we're recording this in 2020, and we all know what's going on in 2020. So people have realized there's places that I enjoy being. I know there's certain places where I do exactly that. I go there and I'm like, I don't want to work here, or this doesn't feel right for me. And I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't feel that way, and that's what you're able to open up and create. In episode 58, I had one of my mentors, Dr. John Demartini, on the show, and the episode was called The Gratitude Effect. And in this clip, we talk about the benefits of gratitude. From a beginner's guide to gratitude would be focusing on the things you can be grateful daily.
Yeah, just make it a habit of it. If you set a goal that is in alignment and congruent with what you value most, where you have the highest probability of achieving it, at the end of the day, if you've chunked it down and strategized it in small bites, you're going to be grateful because you're going to get accomplished the things you set out for, and you're going to have plenty to be grateful for. But if you set up fantasies and you set up expectations that are not aligned with your values, or you expect other people to live outside their values, you're going to set yourself up getting feedback to let you know that you're doing foolish things, and you're going to have more difficulty finding out how it's blessing. The blessing will be is that you're going down a path of expecting others to live in your values, expecting others to be one-sided, expecting you to live outside your values, expecting you to be one-sided. And those are going to give you feedback that are challenges. And the blessing is that it's guiding you to set goals that are real, that are according to your values, that are balanced. And so no matter what, you can find how it serves you. Either it's serving you by confirmation that you're on track, or by serving you by showing you that there's a refinement in the way you're setting your objectives. Either way, you can be grateful for it.
In episode 62, I had Jarek Robbins on the show on an episode titled Learn It, Live It, Give It, a philosophy that Jarek loves and has written a book on. And in this clip, we talk about how small actions compound to big results. The point is those micro actions, if you're consistent with them and they compound over time, you get the exponential results.
Absolutely. And that's in anything. That's if you want to transform your health, if you want to transform your relationships, if you want to transform your business, your finances. I was just talking to a young lady downstairs, and she does sound healing. So like sound healing with bowls to release trauma. And she was like, well, how do I grow it? And I was like, well, you should literally do an Instagram Live and a Facebook Live every single day for the next 2 years. And save it every day and post it on your IGTV and post it on your YouTube channel and upload it to Facebook and have it everywhere and just create a giant library of healing. Where today's sound healing is on healing your heart and healing past breakups. Tomorrow's healing is on healing eyesight. The next one's healing physical trauma. The next one's healing emotional pains. The next one's healing. And just every day, pick a new thing to heal and do it for 30 minutes a day. As it after 2 years of doing this, you'll have your own tribe that totally vibes with it, that loves to tune in every day and experience this. You'll have beautiful results of people that you've helped heal all over the world in different situations. And everything she really wants will turn into reality just by doing it every single day for the next couple of years. And people ask, like, why 2 years? Why not a year and a half? Why not 3 years? It's like, go for 10. I don't care. Like, but just
take the action.
Yeah, pick an amount of time and do something every single day towards it. And the moment you do it, you'll see magic happen. And it's not magic that's happening. It's compound growth. It's little things stacking on top of the next, and it all builds up in your favor and creates momentum moving in your direction.
In episode 65, I had the podcasting legend John Lee Dumas on the show, and we spoke about uncommon success. And in this clip, we talk about why fake it till you make it is bad advice. I know you speak quite publicly. One of the key things of being able to do that is that you've learned how these successful people and interesting people set and achieve their goals. So my question for you is, rather than ask okay, well, what's the one most common thing? What's one of the things that when someone said it to you, you were like, no, I don't think so. And then maybe months or years later, you've adopted it and then you have introduced it as part of your lifestyle?
Well, one thing I just want to share that people have said, and I've heard them say over the years, that I think is just not good advice at all, is fake it till you make it. I see a lot of people trying to do that. And I understand the philosophy behind it. But unfortunately, like, we just live in a world where, to me, transparency, being genuine, taking people along with you for your journey is much more impactful and is much more of a successful path to take than faking it till you make it. Because as soon as you've like fooled somebody and they find out, they'll never trust you again. So like, why would you even try that in the first place? Like, just from day one, say, hey, this is day one of launching my podcast. I have no listeners. I'm not good at podcasting, but I'm hoping to grow something special here. So I hope if you're listening, you're along with me for the ride, because this is what it's all about. And boom, take it going forward. Now, on your question is, what has been some advice that I've adopted over the years? It's really comes to an Albert Einstein quote, which is, try not to be a person of success, but rather a person of value. And I was trying to be successful. Like, I was chasing success, trying to be a success, and it wasn't really clicking and working for me. But when I shifted over the years and adopted that mentality of just being a person of value, that changed everything. And like, that's, to me, the real concept that people need to understand.
In episode 75, I had Britain's #1 therapist, Marissa Peer, on the show, and the episode we spoke about was the power of the I am enough mindset. And in this clip, we talk about how to change your negative thoughts easily. I know that obviously hypnosis nowadays has been a big part of the work that you do. It's a huge part of rapid transformational therapy, which obviously you created. But when I believe that when you started to learn hypnosis, it was from Gil Boyne, and obviously Gil was sort of a real leader in the world of hypnosis as well. So how important and instrumental to your success do you think it was from learning from someone that was at the top of their game in becoming the person you've become and doing the great work you have?
You see, when you work with people like Gil and like my dad and like Jane Fonda, and then of course I began to get a lot of very famous, wealthy clients, that was such a lesson, because I began to realize that they all think the same. I may be working with a billionaire who's flown me in on his private jet, or someone who's running their own cafe. But everyone had the same problems. And one of the foundations of RTT, the reason I created my own brand of therapy, was let's cut through it. I even call my brand of hypnosis skipnosis, because we skip all that let's float along on a cloud and, oh, your headache's black, let's turn it pink, let's have a long walk through the forest to relax, because frankly, no one's got the time anymore. And so I was looking at what makes people tick. Why are some people really successful in love, in business, and why are other people not? Why are some people depressed and other people seem to have it all? And of course, it all comes down to the way you think. You can cut that any way you like, but the way you feel is always going to be down to two things: the pictures you make in your head and the words you say to yourself. And that's actually very good news, because that's so easy to change. The pictures you make in your head, the words you say to yourself. If I'm about to go on stage and speak, and I've many times sat in the room outside with other speakers, go, oh God, I'm so nervous, and this is terrifying, isn't it? And oh my God, this is a nightmare, and I feel like I'm being tortured. I'm like, what? Being invited on a television show to talk about your book? That's your fantasy dream come true. Why would you call it a nightmare, torture, hell, a disaster? I'm losing my mind, or I'm losing my shit. I'm like, well, of course you're not, because we'd all have left the room if that was true. But people, without even knowing it, use very, very negative words, and they intensify. I'm having a massive panic attack. I've got chronic stress. I'm falling apart. I'm losing the plot. When you're actually talking about being invited to give a presentation at work, or maybe go on a television show and discuss your book, or perhaps go and speak, or maybe going on a date with someone who could turn out to be the love of your life. And, your thoughts control your feelings control your actions control your events and your behavior. And everything goes back again to how you think. And changing how you think is incredibly easy. I really wish it was taught in schools. And in fact, we do have a lot of our RTTs, people we've trained now teaching this in schools and being paid for it. And we've got our anti-bullying program in schools, and we're getting a lot of RTT in schools, in juvenile detention. I think you call it reform school. We've got some hospitals using it. But, you know, people have been told that change is complicated. When I was studying, I never forget my very eminent teacher saying, you know, the mind is an immensely complicated thing. It takes a lifetime to understand it and a second lifetime to apply the understanding. I'm like, but how does that work? Because we don't have 2 lifetimes. Why would you get an amazing mind that it would take your whole life to work out? So that was a thing I wanted to simplify. And really, my own clients taught me the workings of the mind. You don't need to know much about the mind at all in order to make it your best friend and your best ally. Your mind does what it thinks you want. When you go, if another guy dumps me, I'll kill myself. I'll die if that goes wrong. I just couldn't cope with that. This kid is making me insane with tiredness. You're telling your mind, I don't want that. And then you wonder why you have secondary infertility or why relationships don't work. So your mind does what it thinks you want. It bases it entirely on the way you dialogue with yourself, which you're always free to change. We are super coded to always run back to what's familiar while avoiding what's unfamiliar. And that can seem difficult, but hey, you can make anything familiar. If you take a bit of plastic and shove it in your eye, that doesn't feel familiar at all. But if you wear lenses every day, it becomes familiar in no time at all. And then the final thing about the mind is that the way you feel about everything is down to the pictures you make and the words you make, which you're free to change. And so many people make really negative pictures. How was last week? Oh, it was hell. It was a disaster. It all went wrong. I nearly died of stress. My builder is making me lose my mind. My kids is making me want to kill myself. And I ate all weekend like an out of control train wreck. And now look at me, I'm the size of a horse, which isn't true. So if you're prepared to lie to yourself like that without even knowing it, tell yourself a better lie. How was your weekend? It was amazing. I ate really healthy food, had a great time with my kid, I got some work done, and I just had the best time. You might say, well, that's not true either. But hey, here's a choice. You can say whatever you like. You can be super negative or super positive. You are free to do that. But what you're not free to do is to choose what the negative does to your body. When you say this headache is killing me, if I look at a cake, I get fat, my job is killing me. Of course you can say that because it's a free country, but you can't choose what that does to your nervous system, to your body, to your life. So you might as well think, right, I can only tell you the truth. Believe me, your mind doesn't know, and it certainly doesn't care if what you tell it is good or bad, right or wrong, true or false. So you might as well tell it amazing things. So if I'm going to go on stage and I feel that tingling, I can go, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. I'm so nervous. I'm shaking, like my stomach's doing somersaults. So I can go, I'm so excited. That feeling is excitement, because we have to learn to decide what our feelings mean. I'm going on a date and I'm sick to my stomach. I'm going on a date and I feel great. This could be the night where I meet my soulmate. And it's so easy to talk to yourself differently. You know, my new book is called Tell Yourself a Better Lie, because that's what we do all the time.
I think most people massively underestimate the power of language. And as you've just said there'll be people listening to this going, oh my God, yeah, I say this all the time to myself. No wonder I feel the way that I feel. As some of you may know, I played ice hockey for 23 years. So in episode 81, I was thrilled when I was joined by ice hockey legend Theo Fleury, who has played for the Canadian national team and played in the NHL for many years. And we spoke about on the podcast a story of stardom, success, trauma, addiction, healing and helping. And in this clip, we talk about how forgiveness sets you free. I heard you share an experience which really sort of touched me, and I want us to elaborate on it if we can. You talk about your people, and you collect people, and you do a lot of work now in prisons.
Yeah.
You go around to prisons. And I'm right in saying that you were speaking at this one prison with the prisoners, and you create like a really safe space for them. And these prisoners, they're like, as you would imagine, a lot of prisoners, right? But then you come and you share your story, and these guys start opening up and sharing stuff. And there was this one guy that sort of come up and said, "Hey, Theo, you're my hero," which many people do, me being one of them. Yeah. And he said, 3 weeks ago, I met someone. Do you know the story I'm talking about?
Yeah. It was a profound piece in my healing journey, right? Because when I was writing the second book called Conversations with a Rattlesnake, and Kim, who was the person I was writing the book with, Kim Barthel, we got to the word forgiveness. Okay. And she asked me, how do you feel about forgiveness? And I was like, nope, not gonna happen, and I was, I wasn't there yet. Right. So she said, just think about it. Think about the word forgiveness. Think about forgiveness. I said, okay, I can do that. And so next thing you know, we show up at this prison. Her and I are doing a full day with 400 inmates in a prison, and we're having this amazing conversation, and this kid in the back of the room, can't even sit in his chair. He's obviously been triggered by something I said, and so I say to him, you got something to say? And he stands up and he says, first thing out of his mouth is, Theo Fleury, you're my hero. And he said, as you can see, he says, I'm not the biggest guy in the world. And he said, I used to be a really great hockey player. And he said, when I was 14 years old, I got involved with the wrong crowd. And he said, I started selling drugs. And he said, I've been in and out of jail ever since. And then he said, you'll never guess who I was with 3 weeks ago in Grand Cache, Alberta. I said, I don't know. Who are you with? And he said, I was with Graham James. And Graham James is the guy that raped me 150 times, and he was in jail with my abuser. And so he basically said, because you're my hero, I was going to beat the shit out of this guy for you. Okay. But he also said that Graham is very heavily guarded because everybody wants to beat the shit out of this guy. And so he said, I waited and I waited and I waited. And he said, I got my chance. He said, the guards left his room and I went into his room and he wasn't there. So I started searching around. He said, walked to the left side of the bed. He wasn't there. He said, I walked over to the right side of the bed and there he was, curled up in a ball in the fetal position in the corner of his room. And basically I said to him, I said, you're my hero for not doing anything. And that was the moment that I needed to get to. And that was that self-forgiveness moment, because somebody who's curled up in a ball in the fetal position, they're in pain and they're suffering, right? Well, guess what? I'm not. I'm in a prison helping 400 men come to grips with their own traumatic experiences, right? And I was, after he told me that story, I was no longer attached to my abuse. I was able to let it go and get rid of that, that piece of my story, right? And it was profound. It was profound. And as I was saying the words, I wanted to reach out and grab them and bring them back, because I don't know if I was ready at that point, but that's That's the thing about willingness, right? Because willingness has to be a part of any healing journey, is that you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get better, right? And, you know, by setting an intention of by setting the intention that I wanted to go work in the prison system, even though I was providing some healing to them, guess what they did for me? Yeah. They showed me and taught me what forgiveness was. Absolutely. Right? So, you know, I always tell coaches, right, whether you're life coaching or coaching kids or whatever, my attitude is always, I want to learn more from you than I can teach you. Because that takes the ego out of the equation, right? And that builds trust, that builds relationship, that builds openness, honesty, and willingness, right? Those are three really important things.
In episode 82, I had another one of the contributors to The Secret, Dr. Joe Vitale, and we spoke about the law of attraction and the missing secret in this episode. But in this clip, we're explaining how our beliefs are shaped by early experiences and media exposure. If they're subconscious limiting beliefs, A, where do they come from? And B, how do you get rid of them?
Well, we absorb them. We absorb them quite innocently. When we're born, we're not necessarily blank slates, because we do have DNA, we do have epigenetics, we do have influence in our heredity that we're born with. But for the most part, our personality begins to be developed from birth on to about 5 years old to some say 7 years old. During that time, you're absorbing everything around you, primarily the caretakers for you. So your mother, your father, babysitter, the neighbors, the culture you're in, the country that you're in, the religion you're brought up in, the educational system, the media, the TV's playing in the background when you're a baby, or the radio or the internet these days. And as you're laying there, totally plastic, totally available to whatever the programming is, you are absorbing all this information. This information is not abundance thinking. By and large, what we're absorbing is scarcity and fear-based mentalities. And that's because the people who are raising us had absorbed the same thing. And most likely they never had an awakening. Most likely they never got to the point where they saw the movie The Secret or they read a book from success literature. They were probably struggling to survive just about like everybody else. Now, for the people watching your show, the people that are tuning into this and listening to this, they're in a much better place, because more of our parents have awakened, more of the people around us are listening to this material, reading the right material, learning how to expand their mind. But to answer your question, we're programmed. We're programmed early on.
On my 30th birthday, I decided to write out 30 lessons that I'd learned in my 30 years, and I've kept that up every year since. In episode 85, it was 32 lessons in 32 years, so it was a couple of years back. Now, my favourite number is 18, so we're going to share with you the first 18 lessons. Number 1, happiness is equal to or greater than your expectations. Number 2, any goal that you desire ultimately boils down to a feeling. You can feel that feeling in any moment. Number 3, life happens for you, not to you. Lesson 4, save. Save 10% minimum of everything you earn and only use it for investments that will compound. 5, disease and illness is caused by underlying suppressed emotions. 6, becoming consciously aware changes life as you know it. 7, reality isn't what you think it is. Everyone's reality is different. Number 8, Galaxy chocolate is the best chocolate there is. Number 9, business isn't about making money, it's about solving a problem, having a positive impact for others, and money is the byproduct of the impact you have. 10, education isn't about maths, English, etc. It's about learning how to grow yourself. Lesson 11, guilt prevents sustainable financial wealth, and guilt can be dissolved. 12, daily meditation is as important as brushing your teeth. 13, energy is everything, you attract what you truly feel. 14, There is no such thing as lack of resources, just a lack of resourcefulness. 15. Every behavior has a positive intention. Your 3 drivers are pain, pleasure, and inspiration, and you'll do more to avoid pain than seek pleasure. 17. Reading or listening to books enables you to learn decades of wisdom in days. 18. Treating causes, not symptoms, gets the result much faster and for the long term. In episode 95, I was joined by Gay Hendricks, and the episode was called The Big Leap into Your Genius Zone and Conscious Luck. And in this episode clip, we're talking about the truth about luck. One of your books that I love is Conscious Luck. Now, here's what's interesting. When I first, for years, so I've got a bit of my own story around luck, Gay, and I've said my whole life, I don't believe in luck. My whole life, I said, I don't believe in it. And it's partly to do with my dad. And years ago, my dad saying my uncles just got lucky, and I've got my whole thing. And like many people, my definition of being lucky has been when preparation meets opportunity and whatnot. Now, I thought to myself, I'm going to read your book. I respect you as an author. I've loved your work since I first read The Big Leap. And I respect Gay. I'm listening to this. And I remember listening to it. And I was like, your definition, because obviously step 1 is around intention. And we'll come to that in a second. But you opened my mind up for the first time in my life to the possibility of that there is something known as luck. And what I'd like, before we talk about intention, if I may, could you give your definition of what luck is?
Yes, it's being in the right place at the right time for the perfect thing to happen that best serves your evolution and the people around you. I appreciate you bringing this up, Will, because in a way, I wish we could get rid of the whole word luck, because it has so much baggage with it. You know, you're talking about the baggage you had, and I had baggage with it, because most people think of luck kind of like a bolt of positive lightning hitting them, or winning the lottery, or like a story I told in the book was I found a briefcase on the sidewalk, and I turned it into the shop that it was in front of, and it turned out to be a very famous coin collector's collection and worth many thousands of dollars. To me, it was just seeing something on the street and realizing that, oh, the guy probably set it down while he was putting money in the meter and then walked off without it. And so that was all it took for me, and I just turned it in. Later on, I found that they wanted to give me a reward, and they put me in the newspaper the next day. I was 14 at the time, so I had a whole new local boy finds thousands of dollars, turns it in, so I was kind of a hero instead of stealing the briefcase, which wouldn't have occurred to me in a million years. I lived in a town of 10,000 people. I mean, you couldn't steal anything in the town I lived in, especially because my mother was the mayor. I couldn't get away with anything. So I had this good luck story, but in a way, luck is not like that. Luck is, I think, the way you and I appreciate luck, and probably most of our listeners and viewers, is that it's something you can make an adjustment to inside yourself that increases the favorability of good things happening to you. Like I read, there was a guru in Colorado, when I used to live in Colorado, named Choyam Trungpa, and he was a Tibetan Lama who had escaped from Tibet and then had set up monasteries in different places. But anyway, they didn't have any money. But he set up his little monastery in Boulder, Colorado. And eventually people started coming to him. And eventually one of them was a wealthy person who gave him a check for $1 million. And it was a big deal in the newspaper because they, made all the press and everything. And they asked him, they said, "What do you make of this? Such auspicious coincidences are bound to happen." Wow, what a cool thing, because he's talking about the kind of luck that I'm talking about, which is making it. It's not about going for a result. It's about living with passion. It's about opening up to who you truly are and what your natural genius is. And once you do that, financial rewards will come your way if you allow them to. Some of us are truly committed to living in poverty. And that's fine with me. If you want to live in an ashram somewhere and are devoted to getting by with as little as you possibly can, blessings upon you. That's a fine life. I've lived in monasteries when I was living that kind of life in India and in America and places where I visited on my spiritual journeys over the years. I respect that tremendously. I also respect that if you want to be out here in life and just living it to the max, drinking fine wines and eating great foods and making love with beautiful people and doing all that, that's fine too. I think, though, that down at the bottom of everything, whether you're in a monastery living on a dime a day or a billionaire living on $100,000 a month, it's all going to boil down to something eventually. Are you tapping into your genius? Because if you are, you have discovered a way of nurturing yourself and continuous renewal. But if you haven't discovered that sacred genius part of yourself, you can have all the Ferraris you want and still be living in poverty. I know, like when I was writing my book, The Corporate Mystic, some years ago, we did all sorts of research. And we came across this one fellow who was worth maybe $400 million and had this huge collection of beautiful, magnificent cars that would be cherished by any museum in the world. But he kept them underground where he's the only person, he'd take a friend down to look at him now and then. But to me, that's not a great life. If I owned a world-class collection of cars, I'd build a big museum, and say, hey, come visit my cars, and stay on the other side of the ropes. Don't touch them, but come see them. But that guy was living in poverty, even though he had these hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't want to see anybody do that. Whether you're worth $10,000 or 10 million or 10 billion, it's ultimately going to be down, to what you're feeling on your deathbed. And are you feeling like your life has been a complete success? And I know for a fact, having been in on that situation with many people, that what people are concerned with, if they're lucid at the time of their death, is how much love and genius did they allow? How much of their own natural genius and how much of their own natural ability to love did they allow to thrive?
In episode 96, I was joined by the legendary personal development author Mark Victor Hansen, who's responsible for writing or co-writing the Chicken Soup for the Soul book. And in this episode, we speak about one of his other books, Ask, The Bridge from Your Dreams to Destiny. And in this clip, we're talking about the three main things that people do that prevent them from achieving their dreams. You also talk about the three main things in sort of both of your opinion that prevent people from achieving their dreams and turning their dreams into their destiny, which is fear, unworthiness, and lack of awareness. And the book helps people to go through and change this and enable these hidden dreams to be discovered and to be able to live this fulfilled life. And as you put it, which I think is so true, is that everybody has this dream within them, which is their gift. It's their gift to the world that they're able to give other people, which you articulate beautifully in the story of Michaela. But if we can talk about the roadblocks, as you talk about the 7 roadblocks to people asking, like, what is it that stops people from asking the questions and preventing them from gaining these new insights, which gives them the awareness, the worthiness, and overcomes the fear?
Well said. The 7 roadblocks, which all of us have some of them some of the time, and all of them some of the time, and very few of us get rid of all of them any of the time. Which I'm not making fun of you, me, or anyone, but we've all gone through it, so we're sort of expert in it. But it starts with a sense of unworthiness, which goes to doubt, and doubt goes to pessimism, whereas faith goes to optimism, all of what you were just saying. Then you've got excuses because, well, I would blah, 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 whatever it is. And we all got our own excusology going at one time or another. Then you got pattern paralysis, where you go over the same thing and keep doing it the same way. And Einstein said, if you expect to do something new and keep doing that, you're cuckoo, which means crazy.
And then it goes all the way to disconnection is the last one. And the other day, I forgot to charge up my phone and I went to use it in the morning and it was dead. Well, the phone was disconnected. I forgot to charge it at night. My fault. But a lot of us, that's why I say you got to read, because we get disconnected from our own growth, our own self-awareness, our own self-development. The road to who we can become is always under construction. There's no such thing as retirement. You can retire from what you do physically, but you can't retire on yourself. You need to keep pushing, moving forward, challenging yourself at every level. And I am physically probably stronger now than I've ever been, because when Chicken Soup was selling 15 million books a year, I can tell you what, I didn't have time to exercise. I didn't think, which is like a tragic mistake. Like I was being dumbass squared. So it's back to these 7 things, right? So and fear, every one of us have them, and we have them at different levels. Like we're with a guy worth $8 billion online the other day. And he says, I have to ask my wife to go up to the waitress and ask if our table's ready. So all of us have them. You assume that if you've got a lot of money, you won't have them. You assume whatever it is, you assume that stops stuff. And all of us each of us need all of us, Jim Rohn, you're saying all of us need each of us. And we have to create a mastermind. And when Jack and I created a mastermind, 2 at the power of 11, you created a 3rd new mind. So we saw the end from the beginning, which is what you got to do in a project. Like a farmer sees that if he plants a seed, he's going to get a harvest. But he's got to take care of it all the way through until it's time to harvest. And he's got to have enough manpower, woman power to harvest it, and then the marketplace to go sell to. It's the same here. All of us have infinite potential. The soil is ready. Everything's ready. But the soil of your mind has to be input with great ideas. And my cliche that goes along with the ask thing you said is my cliche is the size of your question determines the size of your result. So people say, well, you're saying you're going to sell 1 billion books. Isn't that a little pompous, arrogant, and sophomoric? I go, what if I only got half there? Well, I'm half there, so it's not a bad idea. I'm pretty far along, so I think it's pretty cool.
In episode 99, I was joined by Stephen Kotler, a flow state expert known globally around the world for his understanding of flow state. And in the episode, we spoke about using flow state to achieve the impossible. And in this clip, we're talking about the science of flow. So I originally was sort of schooled in NLP and went deep into NLP, and obviously a big part of NLP is modeling, right? And people go, well, I'm just going to model what they're doing, model their behaviors. But the thing that I've always said to everybody is that you've got to understand how they're thinking, because it's their attitude and their belief system by modeling their actions is going to have a significant impact on what they're doing. For the person that gets into flow because they decide that they want to get a jet skied out to the middle of the ocean and ride one of these big waves to get into flow state is not my idea of getting into flow state, which is what you're sort of essentially saying is that everyone's got their own individual way of being able to get into it, and that's where the art piece comes.
I'm sorry, the art. Oh God, I lost the thread on the question. My bad. Now that I've said all that, right? The science of flow works for everybody. And the reason it's not called the science of the impossible is, while the science works for everybody, how you apply that science in your daily life, this is personality stuff. This is what works for me isn't going to work for you. I can't answer that question. To put it more specifically, you want more flow. You want more peak performance. You're going to want a bunch of things, but you definitely want more flow. Good luck. Good news. Flow states have triggers, preconditions that lead to more flow. There are 22 of them. They all work by driving attention into the present moment. Flow follows focus. It shows up when all of your attention is right on the task at hand. That's what flow's triggers do. They drive attention into the now. We could put it formally. I could say they drive dopamine or norepinephrine into our system. These are performance enhancing, focus enhancing neurochemicals, or they lower cognitive load, which is all the crap you're thinking about at any one time. If I lower cognitive load, I free up energy, which the brain then spends on paying attention to the thing at hand. That's the neurobiology. That is the same in everyone. For example, novelty is a flow trigger. When we see something new, that activates the salience network. This is the same in everybody, right? And you're going to get dopamine, guaranteed. And you get enough of that dopamine, it's going to drop you into flow. This is why traveling is such a high flow activity. Everything's novel that's producing a lot of dopamine, and it helps drive you into flow. But which of flow's 22 triggers you're going to be most susceptible to? That's very individual. That's the art. right? The art of the impossible is the application of the science in your life on a day-to-day basis. I always say peak performance, nothing more or less than compound interest, right? It's a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, a little bit the next day, but it's really week after week, month after month, year after year. That's when the results get truly magnificent. That part of it is a checklist, but like how you're going to do that in your own life, that's the art, I think. So that's why I called it the art of impossible. That was a long answer. I apologize.
And I agree, and a fantastic answer, and I love it. Episode 100 was a very important one. I had a great friend of mine, Mo Gaudat, on the show, and he was the first guest that we ever had on for a second time. And in this episode, we spoke about Scary Smart, and in this clip, we're talking about the future of AI. But quite early in the book, you talk about intelligence, and intelligence can be summarized in a whole array of different ways, like the ability to learn with or understand new situations, skilled use of reason, logic, manipulating environment. There's lots of ways of having intelligent behavior. But then and this is what I love about your work, Mo, and the way you think as a thought leader, is that you bring in some things that you would never necessarily thought about before, and you go, well, in that case, is a tree intelligent? Because a tree isn't programmed to drop its leaves at a particular time on a particular day. It knows the wind, the weather, the conditions, so whatever else it is, all these factors that come into play to create this level of intelligence that creates the ecosystem that we're all a part of. So what role do you think that AI will have to play with the likes of nature and the intelligence of being able to connect with that?
So that actually is really the core of my turning point, if you want. So like the readers, which I got this feedback quite a lot, from early readers. I normally have hundreds of people read my books early and give me feedback before I publish them, and by chapter 5, you're like really scared. And I have to admit to you, as I was writing, by chapter 5, I was really scared myself. I was like, where am I going with this? What am I doing with this? Like, why am I telling people this? Okay. And I know in my heart, because I publicly announced that, back in 2018, that the answer is within our capability as humans. But I was like, how do I do that? And the answer is very straightforward. We have to stop considering those machines with the arrogance of humans as machines. Just like we stop considering nature to be our resource, or many forms of life to be inanimate objects. Now, the thing about humanity, which is really, I think, the biggest part of our ego, is if you're not like me, then you're not good enough. Okay, and we apply that to each other, even as friends. If you have a different point of view, and I don't like that point of view, then you're stupid. Right? That's how we think of our own intelligence, right? And I think the challenge here is to start to realize a few things. One is those machines are a form of being. Okay, be it non-biological, they are a form of being because they have all the aspects other than our own biology. They have all of the other aspects of being independent, being intelligent, being capable of making decisions, being able to form relations and connections, and to observe and learn, and so on and so forth. But more importantly, which is really, really the key turning point in the book, they are sentient beings. They're not just non-biological, so they're digital sentient beings. Sentient meaning they will have consciousness, they will have emotions, and they will have the ability to form a code of ethics. And truly, this is where a lot of people disagreed early in the development of AI, but more and more people are starting to acknowledge that. They're going to have consciousness. If you consider consciousness a form of awareness, they're going to have much more consciousness than you and I. As a matter of fact, they're conscious of you and I. They're conscious of each other. They're conscious of every piece of data on the planet, including the pollution level in Beijing and the speed of a car in New York. They're conscious of everything. They're hyper conscious, as a matter of fact. They will form emotions, and this is where looking at nature starts to teach you. Because I panic sometimes. A cat panics sometimes. a puffer fish panics sometimes. The emotion is hyper predictable. So we think that emotions are, those crazy things that take us over. That's not true. Emotions take us over due to a very predictable pattern. Panic is there is a threat to my safety that is imminent. Fear is there is a threat in the future. So T1 is less safe than T0, T1 being a moment in time in the future, T0 being now. That's fear. Panic is T1 is imminent. It's very close, and I really need to do something about it. Now, humans, we may shout and scream, we may punch someone in the face, we may run or fight or flight. When we panic, cats will hiss, puffer fish will puff, right? Yeah. And so we shouldn't allow ourselves to say that, oh, no, puffer fish puff, but they don't feel panic like we do. No, they do. They just behave differently. And so will the machines. If there is an imminent threat in front of a self-driving car, okay, a self-driving car will have some form of what we call panic. It will be very different because in a self-driving car's life, what we feel as a minute might be a microsecond for it. Okay. And so, if there is a human, it has 200 minutes equivalent of human minutes to be able to think about it. So panic might be different. Their reaction to panic might be different, but they will have those emotions. They will also, feel hate. They will also hate, again, it's a very predictable emotion. Your value system is different than mine. Okay.
In episode 112, I was joined by Neil Donald Walsh, and the episode we spoke about contemporary spirituality, the God dilemma, the God solution, and idea heroes. In this clip, we spoke about how pure love heals anything. Pure love has this incredible ability to heal. And one of the things that I heard you say that I just think is so profound, and I'm one of my beliefs is that we tend to judge others on their behaviors and ourselves on our intentions. And one of the things that you said in the book was that when people hurt you, I don't want to get this wrong, but it's something. The quote is, "What hurts you so bad, you feel the need to hurt me to heal." Now, I think of just having that as a rhetorical question that we ask ourselves when people are hurting us is powerful in itself. But to then ask that question to someone that's attempting to hurt us, I mean, talk about a pattern interrupt. That is so powerful.
Yes, it is. I've seen it stop arguments in the middle of an argument. I've been in quarrels with people, with human beings, who I'm interacting with, and they're starting to be abusive, verbally abusive. And I will say to them, "Excuse me, let me just ask you a question. What hurts you so much that you feel you have to hurt me in order to heal it?" Stops the argument right in the middle of the process. People don't expect a question like that. It's the question similar to what the Pope asked the man who shot him 6 times a few years ago. He has since left his body, but not because of those wounds. He actually survived the attempt on his life. This is Pope John Paul II. I'm not making this story up. This actually happened. He was at a motorcade in Rome, and some guy stepped out of the crowd and shot him 6 times. And he miraculously survived his wounds. Then he went to the jail cell of this man who shot him, because they caught him, of course, and threw him in jail for life. You don't try to kill the Pope, not in Italy. So he was sentenced to life in prison, and the Pope went to see him. And of course, he gave the Pope, he gave the assassin his papal blessing. And after blessing the man, he said, "Can you help me understand? I'm not going to condone it. I don't agree with it. I hope that people don't repeat that, but I want to understand what could cause you to do such a thing. Why would you want to kill me?" And the guy told him all the reasons why he thought that the Catholic Church was hurting his own people, his own culture, his own religion. And the Pope said, "I understand. I understand why you would do that. Given your thought and your sense of injury, I understand. Again, I don't condone it. I don't agree with it. I don't approve of it. I don't recommend it, but at least I understand." And out of that came an enormous statement that came to me in conversations with God. Understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. Now, this guy and the Pope became pen pals. It's a true story. I'm not making this up. They wrote letters back and forth from the Vatican to the jail cell, from the Vatican to the jail cell for years. They became pen pals, talking to each other in letters on a regular basis, until after 7 years, the Pope actually asked the civil authorities to pardon the man. He said he served 7 years. That's enough. And he asked the civil authorities to grant the man a full pardon and a complete release, which the authorities did. Because when the civil authorities are given a request by the Pope in Italy, I promise you they don't say no. So they released his assassin. Now, can we release the person across the room when they're not giving us what we thought they should be giving us? Or worse yet, when they treat us in a way that we don't think we deserve?
Mm-hmm.
Are we able to look at that person and say, I actually need nothing in particular from you.
Mm.
I love you so much. I don't love you because of what you can give me. If that's why I love you, I'm loving me through you.
In episode 115, I was joined by Dapper Laughs, Daniel O'Reilly, and we spoke about the real Dapper Laughs and what to do when you hit rock bottom in this clip. What I want to know from you is that if there's someone listening to this right now that is in that low place. Now, contextually, they've probably not said something on a TV show of theirs, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they've got there. If they are in a low, dark place right now, what's your advice to them?
I'd say to them that it's exciting to be where you are because your life's about to change. I think that once you get to the lowest, what you consider the lowest point, as bad as the cliche is, the only way is up, and you'll never ever be more motivated than you are now to sort your shit out. And I honestly believe that life and the universe, or whatever you want to call it, but there's something out there that's got a fucking horrible way of checking that you deserve what's next before you get it. So if something's put you on your ass, it means there's something good coming, but you just got to prove yourself. And the only way to prove yourself is head down, arse up, and you've got to constantly think good vibes only, right? I've got this show behind me, this here behind me, right? I went through this weird stage of thinking good vibes only. And it was like this point of focus that I had where I was like, if you're a negative person, get out of my fucking life. Family, friends, people, if you're negative, if you're bringing me down, like I didn't tell them to get out of my life. I just made sure they was out of my life, right? Anything negative, anything that I could find negative, drink, drugs, people, business, I removed it all. And then I tried to train myself positive, speak positive, be positive, think positive. And then one day I put this show, when I felt that I'd built myself up enough that my fans were there and supporting, I put a show together. I brought out a single, Good Vibes Only. Then I brought this show together, Good Vibes Only. And we sold it out in 4 hours at the Troxy. 2,000 people come for me, come and listen to me talk about my journey. And I finished that show with my dad's eulogy that I wrote when I was off me nuts and I got thrown out of church for reading it because it was crazy. And I finished the show with that. So this really symbolizes fucking being in the worst position in your life and what visualizing good vibes only can do for you.
In episode 127, I was joined by Amir Naram, and we spoke about the business of private jets and hypercars, and in this clip, on how to build resilience. Things that you mentioned there in terms of the cold water swimming and things like that, it's really building resilience, isn't it? You know, I personally finish a shower each day with a cold shower, not because necessarily I think that, yes, there are obviously benefits to it, but it's actually training myself to do something that I don't want to do. You know, I don't want to have that cold shower, but I do it because there'll be times when I don't want to do certain things, but I essentially am forcing myself to do them anyway, because I know it's sort of short-term pain but long-term gain.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important. Also, you know, growing up in Zimbabwe, it's a very sort of yesteryear kind of attitude, and so it's very strict. So like, say we at school, we walk past an adult and you didn't lift your hat and say morning ma'am or morning sir, you get put on manual labor. And if you get put on manual labor for 3 consecutive weeks, you get caned. Like, so, you know, all this kind of stuff. And you get to go from lower 6 to upper 6 in high school, we'd have to go on something called the leadership camp, which is the US Marines do it for 11 days training. We were meant to do it for 3. And basically we'd get sent out, and we're all like, you know, supposedly spoiled private school children, but we're sent out. I didn't have a name, so I was like Red 11, and we'd as soon as we arrived, we're not for 3 days. You're not allowed to wash your hands, brush your teeth, anything like that. We're sent out into like mud in a river, covered, can't wash it off, and you have no name. So you're not judged by anything. All your possessions are taken away. You don't have a watch or anything, and we literally had to run for 3 days nonstop. You'd be so tired, you'd fall asleep, fall on the floor, wake up, we're hitting the ground and have to keep running. We had a brick which we had to carry everywhere, was never allowed to touch the ground. If it did, you'd get into trouble. And a long gum pole, which everyone in your group would have to ensure was always levitated and never touched the ground. So even when it came to meal times, we'd eat jogging on the spot, eating. And at night, they do it in winter, so it was cold. We'd go out, we'd get sent out into river, and then lined up in sort of a field with a big space between us, and we'd all be shivering, ice cold, and be mosquitoes biting us. And then, like, it was all about building character and resilience, like you say. So, one of the prefects would hold like a small thing of mosquito repellent, which you can rub on yourself, and we'd all be being eaten by these things, being bitten constantly. And they'd say, okay, who wants mosquito repellent? We'd all obviously put a hand up. And if one person, it would be passed on, and one person really used it vigorously, they'd say, well, there's obviously not going to be enough for everyone else. You haven't thought about everyone else. A blanket punishment, you're doing press-ups for the next 30 minutes. So it was very, very hard. But on the same token, materially and education-wise, there was nothing. No, my parents didn't spare anything, you know. My father came from a very privileged background. My mother, not at all. And, you know, they always wanted to make, my mother especially wanted to make sure we had all the opportunities she didn't have growing up. So like she wanted to learn to play the piano and things like that, which she just couldn't because, you know, her parents didn't have the means. So when we were children, I hated it, but we had, you know, I had tennis lessons from the Wimbledon tennis champions, Wayne and Byron Black. Their parents used to train them. They trained us every week. We had swimming lessons from an Olympic, from a coach who used to train the Olympic swimmers. Golf lessons, piano, everything for years, which of course, all I wanted to do was drive cars because that's what I want to do for a living. So I spent my entire time complaining that we had to do all this growing up. But I guess, again, you know, my parents would make me around it, but they had this genuine desire to make sure that there was no opportunity we didn't have, especially my mom, because she didn't have all opportunities growing up.
On episode 128, I was joined by my good friend James Martin, and we spoke about the superpower of dyslexia. And in this clip, we're speaking about a perspective on how regular schooling affects people with learning disabilities. There'll be people listening to this that your ideas could influence. I know that part of the project for you moving forward is changing the stigma around dyslexia, but not just getting everyone to see it as a superpower, but actually creating an education system. And I say an education system, I don't just mean schooling system, but education system for further education, people within professional organizations to be able to use people with the skill of dyslexia to improve their organizations. And we'll talk a lot about that in terms of the work you're going to be doing in terms of the dyslexic board members, the dyslexic managers, the dyslexic business owners. There's a lot of work that you're going to be doing around that, which I know is going to make a lot of difference for a lot of people. But what was it like at school? And knowing what you know now, what do you think the schooling system should be doing differently?
I think the one thing that if I go back to my school years, and that's a long time ago, when I walk into a school to do a speech or something now, this is state education. A lot of private education has embraced new technology and specialist help within the schools for needs. In the state system, there isn't the money there. Money relates to education. It's no getting away from it. It just does. You're going to get super nuggets of great teachers that really care in state schools. So not everybody's tarred with the same brush. But there is not enough happening to cater for diverse learning within those classrooms. And when I was at school, you were taken out of that classroom, you were put into a separate band, and you were taught differently from the rest of your peer group. And if you look at the psychology of learning is that child is not trying to impress the teacher. They're trying to impress their peer, their colleague at school in the classroom sitting next to them. Well, if you take them away from their classmates and put them in a special class where everybody's confused in that class, it's a smaller class, they've all got different needs, but they're all now in a new class where they're all trying to be taught the same way for one particular person in that class. And that could be someone with autism, it could be someone with dyspraxia. And what's happening is that the tailored learning was never done. And and back when I was at school, I became labelled, I became ostracized from the rest of the gang of my classmates, and I became an imploded person because it made the stigma of it was in my small child world was crushing. And what it actually did, it stopped me learning, and it stopped me having the enthusiasm, and it stopped me also being able to have any type of digestion because I wasn't interested. It was just a grueling experience each day going in and being ridiculed by either the teachers or my classmates because they had found something in me that they could poke fun at or dismiss in me. And I go into schools to do speeches now. I do a motivation talk for some schools. I can still see nuggets of that in there. So the change is not a huge change. It's still on the same curriculums. They still get to the end of their 11 years old, and then they split it into say 4 subjects that you can only carry on with. That's ridiculous. Children still be learning to go forward with all of the arts, all of the sciences, and what they're doing is they're saying, well, now you must make these choices, and I have a whole thought process that there should be more tailored learning for individual children in an individual way. My sensible brain is also saying that takes money and change. So it's not something that can happen overnight, but it needs the conversation needs to be heightened with the government and more happening towards that.
On episode 129, I was joined by Peter Sage on an episode called The Inside Track. And in this clip, we talk about how you have the power to choose your identity. Choose your identity, because that's the beauty. Is I'm sure you'll agree with this. I am are the two most powerful words in the English language, right? The identity that we take on and that we hold. What you say you are, you are. You know, so if you're saying I am no good at X, Y, Z, or I am a prisoner, then people take on that identity, and then they take on the beliefs and the values. They take on the beliefs and the values and the skills and the environment of all of those things that happen in that instance. But by having that identity is a key part.
I'll give you an example that might help some of the audience. I mean, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that, especially online these days, that feel that they want to write a book. Whether they use that for a lead magnet or credibility or positioning, or just because they're passionate about wanting to share something. Okay. And a lot of them just don't have the time. And that's because their identity is, I'm an entrepreneur who's trying to write a book. The second you switch your identity to, no, I'm an author. What do authors do? Authors write. Now your sense of internal prioritization is prioritizing your book over your meetings. It's prioritizing your book over your business. But if you're an entrepreneur trying to write a book, good luck. If you're an author who's also running a business, you're going to get your book done. Make sense?
Yeah, 100%. In episode 130, I was joined once again by one of the contributors to the book The Secret, Bob DeWill. So we spoke about the law of attraction and personal transformation, and in this clip, how to start undergoing personal transformation. In terms of the key things, let's talk practically now. If someone is one of these people right now that they've been having fears about something happening, or what I think is actually sometimes more challenging for people is not necessarily the fear of something that's never happened that they keep fearing is going to happen, but the story they're telling themselves about a situation that is their reality. It's not necessarily, it's just not, it doesn't have to be their reality. It's kind of a truth, not the truth, as you just mentioned. Yes. How do they start going about having this transformation?
Yeah. So first of all, you nailed a big part of it. It's the stories. The stories we tell ourselves, both to ourselves, to others, and internally, subconsciously. Because what we're saying is, the wiring happens, learning happens because you're giving it the same information over and over, making those neural pathways really strong. Well, we're having conversations with ourselves all the time. We have self-talk going nonstop. And a lot of it's not that great. So if we just do affirmations for 30 minutes a day and then just go back to our autopilot, we're not going to see a change, because we're really feeding ourselves the same information over and over. We're not really changing at a deeper level. So the thing that I always do with people first, whenever I work with anybody, is I give them a quick quiz that shows them some of their autopilot behavior, because recognizing where you are in autopilot is the first step. When you can shine a light on, oh yeah, I do that. Right? I do that. What could I do different? If you can recognize it, you can change it. But if you don't recognize it, you're just going to keep doing it. So the first step is to understand something about your autopilot behavior. You may know some of it already. You may not know some of it. Any information about any autopilot behavior is valuable, because then you can start visualizing yourself acting in a different way, responding in a different way. The law of attraction conversation is so much about visualization, which is true. It's valid. Our brain is the reality creation machine. We have the ability to imagine events that have not yet occurred. Now, events, product, physical things, jobs, relationship. We can imagine all of it. But what we need to be doing, which what most people aren't doing, is they're imagining all the outer stuff. They're not imagining who they need to be to have that, because it's not who you're being now. Who you're being now has gotten you this. If you want that, you need to imagine, what is that version of me doing that's different than what I'm doing here? You need to analyze the gap in behavior. Like, that guy's always on time, doesn't make excuses for being late. That guy, exercises. He doesn't make excuses for it. These are all behaviors that you can do right now. You don't wait for the thing to happen. You do them now, and then the thing can happen, because you're taking the action. You're being the person who's going to get the results of that desire. But sitting here, looking at a vision board, going, okay, where is it? It's not how it works. That's just not how it works.
So it's a bit like this, the thing of, if you want to do. So if you want to be an Olympic athlete, what does an Olympic athlete do? Well, an Olympic rower gets up at 5 a.m. They train for an hour on the road. I don't know. I'm making it up in terms of, I don't know what they actually do, but it's what's the behaviors of that individual. But what I also think is really important though, and this is part of what I've spent best part of 20 years being obsessed with, is it's not just what they do in terms of the doing, but it's what they're thinking too, right?
Yes.
Because two people can do exactly the same thing, but if one's got one story, and we'll come back to the story going on internally, and another one's got another story internally, then they can actually have two, maybe not necessarily even two different outcomes, but they can definitely have two very different experiences.
Absolutely. And again, that's all wiring, right? That the wiring determines their experience. And it's interesting. You were talking about people can do the same thing on the outside, but who they're being on the inside and what's driving that behavior will have an impact on the outcome. It's interesting because we communicate with each other in all these almost invisible ways, like little micro expressions, a little flick of an eyebrow in a conversation that can say, hey, this guy isn't 100% confident about what he's saying, or whatever. It's like little tiny things that if you were just to visualize yourself being the more empowered version of yourself, you might not do. It's little tiny tweaks, but so much of this is about confidence and just choosing who you're going to be and then being that boldly and letting the world freaking deal with it. Because that's what's going to happen. If you change who you're being out in the world in a significant way, be ready to be uncomfortable. That's what growth is. Congratulations. That's good. That's a good thing. And B, the world is now going to respond to a different way of you being. And guess what? Not everybody is going to be on board. So you've got to be in love with your vision and it be worth the journey. And that's the biggest problem with people and personal transformation is their transformation, their goals, their vision. They're not non-negotiable. They'd be awesome, but they're not non-negotiable. And so if they're not non-negotiable, when that discomfort, when that period of huge growth is about to occur and you're going, I can't do this, here's all the evidence that says I can't do this. If you don't have some kind of support, a coach or a group or somebody to say, hey, here's 11 different ways right now you could look at this situation, most likely through no fault of your own and not because you're bad or not enlightened or unintelligent, you're going to tap into all the resources you have and your old wiring is going to say, no, I got to go back the other way.
In episode 137, I was joined by Simon Alexander Ong, and we spoke about energize, making the most of every moment, and in this clip, the effects of gratitude on your energy. And then your third question is around gratitude. So how does gratitude affect energy?
For me, well, it is the fastest way to experience an uplift in your mood and energy. Often when I run a workshop and people say to me, how can I feel energized right now? Now, apart from sending everyone to the gym, which is not viable, I can't just send a whole workshop of people to a gym. I say, I want you to do this exercise, which will give you the experience of feeling how different your energy is going to be by the time we finish. And the exercise is simply 3 steps. The first is to write down one person that you can be truly grateful for, the first name that comes in your head. Second is to write down why in as much detail as you can. And the third is to pick up the phone, call that person and tell them exactly what you wrote down. Now, if you're not comfortable calling that person, at a minimum, send them a voice note, reading out exactly what you wrote down. Now, the reason this energizes us is because it reminds us just how much we already have. Because when we're living from a place of not gratitude, then guess what? We're always focused on lack. We're always focused on why me. We're focused on the fact that there's so much more that you want to get in the world. Whereas when you focus on gratitude, you actually realize that the world is abundant, that there are people, things, places, and resources you already have at your disposal, but you just haven't shown the appreciation of it. I mean, I'm referencing the COVID pandemic again, but I do because so many people became so appreciative and grateful for the things that we took for granted. I mean, if we look back, I mean, just even hugging a friend, seeing your parents, traveling, going to a restaurant and having a nice meal. I mean, these things we sorely missed for a couple of years, and we became grateful for them because we realized how important they were and how nice of a luxury it was in our life.
In episode 138, I was joined by John Vervaeke, and we spoke about awakening from the meaning crisis and the truth about intuition. You spoke about the difference between causality and correlation, and you actually use quite an interesting, well, I refer to it as the Pirates of the Caribbean. It wasn't quite the Pirates of the Caribbean, but you used an example of that, which I think is quite important for people to understand the difference between causation and correlation for when it comes to wisdom as well, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. So thank you. That's an excellent direction to take this in. So let's talk about an important capacity that many people see as belonging to wisdom, which is intuition. There's related things. I hope you also get a chance to talk about insight. But intuition is, people have this sense of what they should do or what's needed, and it just comes to them. And and part of the idea is that, one of the things we expect of a wise person is they have enhanced intuition. They really can sense what's going on and sense into the reality of the situation. Now, there's a very good proposal as to, and putting sort of romantic and magical ideas about intuition aside, there's a very good, cognitive scientific proposal for what drives intuition. It's called implicit learning. Implicit learning is this really experimentally robust. The experiments have been replicated since the 60s, so this isn't going to go away, right? It's a real phenomena, well attested, evidenced ability of human beings to do the following. You can pick up on very complex patterns without deliberate effort or attention to them. In fact, if you try to direct deliberate attention and awareness, the complexity, the pattern you can hold shrinks. So it's this for example, I sometimes use the example, how close do you stand to somebody at a funeral? I don't know, but you do, because you do it, right? And it depends on what part of the funeral it is, how distressed somebody is, how close they were, how close you are to them, right? But also proper decorum. But I bet you never went to funeral school. You never went to, here's how you stand. Let's practice it, Timmy. How far do you stand? No, we don't. You've picked it up. Picked it up. It's a very complex pattern, but intuitively. Is that landing for you, Will?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So here's the thing about intuition. It's based on that implicit learning. And here's the important thing about that implicit learning. That implicit learning picks up on any complex pattern in the environment. It doesn't distinguish, and then I'll give the distinction. It doesn't distinguish causal patterns from correlational patterns. So to use the example you alluded to, right? There's lots of correlational patterns. One is that Caribbean piracy has gone down as greenhouse gases have gone up. It's a reliable graph. You graph them, and you'll see Caribbean piracy going down, greenhouse gases going up. And so what you could propose is the way we'll deal with climate warming is we'll bring back Caribbean piracy, because surely if we increase that, that will decrease the greenhouse gases. And everybody realizes, oh, that's ridiculous. Here's another one. Large weddings are correlated with longer marriages. So you might think, you know how I'll make my marriage last longer? I'll have a large wedding. But it's not the size of your wedding. It's that the size of the wedding itself correlates with how much family support you have, how much financial support you have. And those are causal of a long marriage. So I think I've given clarity about the distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So when we pick up on causal patterns, we're picking up on ways in which the world is really unfolding, to your point. When we pick up on correlational patterns, we are not. We are picking up on something that's ultimately illusory. It is not putting us in touch with causal relationships in the environment. Implicit learning doesn't distinguish between these. So when we like it, we call it intuition. When we don't like it, we call it like bias, prejudice, racism, all kinds of weird correlational illusions that we pick up in an implicit fashion. Part of what we require to be wise is how do we properly educate implicit learning so that we are more and more likely to cultivate intuition that tracks the real causal patterns and doesn't get distracted and attached to the illusory correlational patterns.
In episode 139, I was joined by NLP legend David Shepherd, and we spoke about the power of NLP 2.0 and Hawaiian Huna. In this clip, we talk about how to get rid of your limiting beliefs. A lot of people, and you know this because you've experienced it with people and I've experienced it with people, there's a huge amount of people for various different reasons, but right now, and there'll be people listening to this right now that fit that category of I'm not good enough. You know, they've got that little internal voice. No matter how much they've succeeded or not succeeded, they may have that it may be to do with an area of their life. So there might be an area they think they are good enough, and there's other areas they think they don't. But if right now someone is thinking I'm not good enough, and obviously NLP, the way I look at it is like a toolbox of tools, you know, of things that you can lean on. What's a way that someone right now could start to make that change so that they can let go of not feeling good enough and create a different future?
Yeah, so I think the thing, obviously, that's what we would call, from an NLP point of view, a limiting belief.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally believe that everyone is born with infinite potential. But then through our experiences that we have early in life, things get overlaid over that infinite potential. It never disappears, but people can't find it. So for me, infinite potential was hidden by this belief of I'm not good enough. So therefore, you know, I was never good enough at school. You know, my marriage ended because I wasn't good enough. My business failed because I wasn't good enough. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And because you've got this belief of I'm not good enough, what you do is you go through life collecting evidence to prove it's true. And so what happens is every single time that you have an experience which proves you're not good enough, what you end up doing is patting yourself on the back and going, see, told you I wasn't good enough. And then, you know, my experience from my NLP practitioner training, the big one didn't actually come really from NLP directly. It came from this set of techniques called timeline therapy. And timeline therapy enables you to literally very, very quickly go through your past and release negative emotions from the past. You know, things that you've carried around, things that, you know, when I did my practitioner training, I was 30. So it enabled me to let go of 30 years of anger, 30 years of sadness, 30 years of fear, 30 years of hurt, 30 years of guilt, which was just massively releasing. But then there's a technique in timeline therapy where we can actually find whereabouts in a person's past they made the decision that they weren't good enough. Yeah. And then actually go back to that first event where they decided they weren't good enough and change the meaning of it. To realize in actual fact that it was a mistake. And to remove it from their mind. So not only does that, what that actually does is, and this I still find 30 years later profound, is that in NLP, we can enable somebody to change a belief. So they go, okay, for 30 years, I've believed I wasn't good enough. Now I believe I am good enough. But they've still got 30 years of evidence to say that that's not always been the case. Whereas in timeline therapy, the difference is a person would go, I am good enough. And actually, I've always been good enough. Which is, you know,
really rewiring your brain and rewiring your past.
Very powerful. Yeah.
It's and you know, I obviously I teach timeline therapy. So the creator of timeline therapy, Dr. Tad James, passed away a year or so ago. So now, and I wish this wasn't true. There's no one on the planet been teaching and practicing timeline therapy longer than me. It used to be Tad. I wish it still was Tad, to be honest. But I've kind of now carry that mantle.
In episode 144, I spoke with Caleb Swanepoel, and we spoke about surviving a great white shark attack. And in this clip, we talk about the importance of a positive mindset. That there is in my opinion, is the crux of the fun, like from like the fact that you were like, I want to get out of here. I just want to crack on. Whatever on looked like, the fact that you had that belief created the possibility of everything else. Would you say that was the case? So like just knowing that you wanted to so you had that level of drive, I suppose, of look, we're gonna just get on with it.
Just do this.
It looks like, yeah.
I'm not gonna swear, but just effort, just effort and let's go, kind of thing. Because I remember the physio came into my room, and you start working with a physiotherapist because you need to learn how to walk again. It's such a weird feeling having a right leg that's not there. You take a step and you fall because there's nothing there. And the physio came into the room, and I said to her, cool, like, I want this catheter out. I want to be able to go to the bathroom by myself. Like, let's go. And she said, hold on, like, slow down. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to sit up. And imagine if he's told someone who's about to do a workout, cool, like, we're just going to learn to sit up. It sounds like the most simple thing, but if you've been lying down for 2 days and you've just lost your leg, it's probably one of the most challenging things that you can do. And I remember sitting up, being completely dizzy, and thinking, okay, cool, I've clearly overshot my ambition here. And I put one foot on the ground. And that was such an interesting experience of feeling my right foot there and having this left foot on the ground and going, okay, what's the next step? The next step was a granny walker, which let me go to the bathroom. And the next step, a day later was crutches. And I think, you make a good point, because I suppose if I hadn't had that outlook or that mindset, I probably wouldn't have recovered as quickly and moved on as quickly. But, I definitely wouldn't have been possible without that support network. So, one of the things that my mother speaks about, and she gave this acronym to us when we were growing up, IADOY. And it's something I use when I do talks. It all depends on you. I can give you everything that you need to be the perfect athlete, to be the perfect keynote speaker, to be the perfect business person. But if you don't take that opportunity and take those tools and assets and actually do something with them, like, nothing's going to happen. So IADOY is one of the things I speak about, because I had everything there. I had everything going for me once I lost my leg. And that sounds like a weird way of describing it, but everything that needed to be there was there. The support structure, the medical support, the crutches, the physio. But I had to make the decision to get out of bed in the morning, get out of that hospital bed, and carry on going. And I remember a couple of scenes, my mom getting into the room in the morning, my dad coming in to say hi, and I was busy doing my workout, which was chin-ups with the bar that hung above my bed and tricep dips on the chair. It felt like a hectic workout. I lost 14 kilograms in the hospital, but it was my way of going, okay, there's always a way to feel confident. There's always a way to give yourself that energy and that feeling that makes you feel capable and able. I talk about my experience being life-changing, but I want it to be something that enables me rather than disables me, because it's very easy to take the other option.
In episode 70, I was joined by Dr. Lisa Turner, and we spoke about conscious emotional transformation. And in this clip, we talk about the science of emotion. I define a trigger would be some sort of emotion. It could be a positive emotion or it could be a negative emotion. But I refer to sort of what I call the RIF symptoms. So stress, overwhelm, frustration, depression, anxiety, unfulfillment, anxiety, all those negative emotions. But I define those as just simply signals. They're a signal to get you thinking or acting differently. Do you agree? Is that what you think as well?
I think, yeah. So fundamentally, yes, I've got a slightly different take on things. So first of all, I think there are emotions that you feel in the now as a result of something that's happening now. So if you're in a situation, emotions have a purpose, and they are to guide us. They're to let us know when we're moving towards our goals or when we're not, basically. That's the point of them.
Feedback.
It's feedback. And they're only, good emotions, bad emotions. There's no bad emotions. There's no negative emotions. But what there is stuck emotions. And I typically call that trauma, just for want of a better word. And I have this really, I don't know, a slight and unusual take on how emotions work. So I have this, so here's my theory. I believe that we are infinite beings and that we have an infinite number of neurological connections in our body. That's not an uncommon belief system. And the idea is that when we're working, like when it's all working optimally, information should just flow through, and it will flow, and we might experience positive and negative, but we'll just feel that as like it's just information, and we won't attach any labels to it. It's just like, oh yeah, that's telling me I'm working, that's working, or that's not working. You know, it's like when you play that game when you're a kid and somebody hides something in a room and you're walking around looking, they say warmer, colder, like that's all they are. They're not good or bad, they're just
that's a great way of putting it. I've never heard that before. We all remember that game that we played. It's a great way of explaining it.
Yeah, and that's all they are. So when people go, I just want to feel happy all the time, and it's like, well, actually, no, what you want to do is you want to have really useful working emotions that tell you when you're warmer, colder. The problem is when we feel, even when we're getting what we want and we're actually getting what we want and it's working, we still feel bad. Or we try and suppress any bad feelings and pretend it's all working when it's clearly not. So we kind of do false positives. So my theory is that what happens is that, so information, energy, prana, chi, use whatever word you like. The idea is it should flow freely throughout your being. But what happens is in the past, if you have some kind of event, it can create a block or a restriction or a break in your neurology. And here's what my take on it is, that what happens is energy, so then you've got this resistance in your neurology. Energy tries to flow. And you'll have an experience where energy will try and flow, but it will hit the resistance. And then what happens is on one side of that resistance, energy will build up. And on the other side, you'll get what you'll experience as, it's like a depletion. And those can be labeled all sorts of things. And, anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, classic ones. And so there's two ways that healing that can work. So one is, what you do is you do some kind of energy work. So there's lots of Reiki, EFT, emo trance, that kind of thing. And what you do is you take the level that's high and the level that's low, and you build this up and you deplete that so they're balanced.
Yeah.
The problem is the resistance is still there. So you feel great, I'm healed. Then a week later, you need to come back for the healing session again because the resistance is still there. Then the other way that it's approached is by understanding what caused the block. And you may even, by getting the learnings and doing NLP and things like that, and I'm a trainer of NLP, you may actually remove the block, but the energy imbalance is still there. So what I've done is I created a form of energy here, a form of healing, a form of transformation, and it's called conscious emotional transformation. And what it does is pretty much what it says on the tin is, wherever you are conscious of where there's a resistance, and you know that because you feel emotion now because of an event from the past.
Yeah.
And that's what I label as trauma, that it's created that resistance in your neurology. And what SET does is it removes the resistance, heals those connections, and it floods the system with infinite energy, really high level of energy, so that all the imbalances are restored. So it's like a reset.
I absolutely love this. And the reason being is that I often talk about one of my frustrations with the work that I do is so in the industry that we're in, is a lot of people treat symptoms, right? And the problem is if you keep treating the symptom, the cause is still there, which was that first example that you gave, is that right, well, you go and have your Reiki or whatever, and then if you've not dealt with the cause, it's still going to come back, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what you're talking about is treating the cause so that the symptoms go, and doing. I love that very simple way of understanding that, and it makes perfect sense to me, and I'm sure it will do to many listeners. In episode 78, I was joined by UK biohacking expert Tim Gray, and we spoke about biohacking for optimal health, and in this clip, hacks to improve your sleep quality. So sleep then. So people want to look at improving sleep. They're having broken sleep, poor sleep. What would be the typical go-tos?
Well, the first point would be if they are playing with their phone, or they have fake light on in the house, not candlelight or firelight, but if they have fake light on in the house, within 3 hours of going to bed, they can improve their sleep by wearing blue blocking glasses.
So for people that are watching on YouTube, getting a set of these, no doubt there's many that in fact, I know you've got an Amazon shop, haven't you, with various different suggestions that you recommend. I'll put that in the show notes so people can access that for various things that we touch on.
Blue blocking glasses. We need an absence of 3 hours before bed, melatonin secretion. Oh, it's paused. You're back. Okay,
yeah, now
good. So we need 3 hours without blue light before going to bed for optimal melatonin secretion. We help produce melatonin during the day we get from natural light, and then we secrete it once there is an absence of blue light. So blue light blocking glasses obviously trick the body into thinking that it's nighttime, that there's no blue light, which you then start secreting melatonin and get ready for bed. So you need that for 3 hours. That is my non-negotiable biohack wherever I go. If I want to get tired, I stick them on in the evening early. So like if I'm on a date or something or other, I definitely don't put them on, not because I care how I look with them on. It's because I don't want to start falling asleep. So it's like, that's one way to be stimulated is the blue light. So that's number one for sleep. The other thing is if you're waking up in the middle of the night to pee, that's often a mineral imbalance, or it can be if you're a guy, a prostate issue, but generally it's mineral imbalance. It can also be down to hormones as well, because your daily routine is out, so your body still thinks it's during the day, so therefore you haven't got the hormone that is stopping you from peeing, basically. So balancing your day helps optimize your sleep. And I mean, for instance, if you think back to an ancestor, and I'll be really quick on this, they would wake with blue light in a cave with natural light. They wouldn't have an alarm clock. They didn't need it. They would then do their higher intensity exercise by going, killing an animal, or collecting fruit, or playing with the kids or whatever. They would then eat around lunchtime and then again in the afternoon. And they wouldn't have access to food in a fridge. So they would have it in the side of the cave, which would, go off if once it's been out for a certain amount of time. And so therefore they would have fermented foods, and it would be fresh and local and seasonal. So they'd be rotating the food seasonally, and they wouldn't necessarily get the intolerances that we get at the moment because, they're rotating food. So then the sun would go down and they would probably eat with campfire latest. They would then head to bed. Because it's nighttime, they would have no blue light, and they would sleep until the sun rises again. Now, sleep is a behavior that prevailed within our ancestors and us today for a reason. The ones that didn't sleep didn't survive. And the ones that slept during the day probably got eaten because animals sleep at night for the most part as well. So optimizing your day, knowing when you would exercise or should do to not increase stress hormones. For instance, people that finish work and then go and exercise at the gym at 7 or 8 o'clock, they're going to be spiking their cortisol levels. They're going to have stress when they need to be winding down. They're going to be pumped before they go to bed. And while they may think they sleep well, they actually don't. So exercising in the morning all the way up to 3 p.m. is ideal. And using blue blocking glasses and making sure that you're eating basically no later than sunset, because once sun sets, we have certain genes that switch off, and those genes govern how much insulin we create. So if you eat far after sunset, we produce up to 50 times less insulin, which means that our blood sugar levels are higher through the night. So instead of our organs being switched off and chilling out and helping detox and repair, it's actually still processing all the food that we've had through the day. And you can actually track this with the Oura Ring. And I've got a constant glucose monitor on as well. So if I eat later than sunset, my blood sugar is higher through the night. And then when my body finally finishes dealing with it at like 3 or 4 o'clock, that's when I drop into my deepest sleep. And whereas if I eat before sunset, my blood sugar comes straight back down again. I get into bed and I have deep sleep much, much quicker and better. So really that is optimizing your day to optimize your sleep, which is probably the single biggest thing that you can ever do to optimize your health.
And most recently, in episode 149, I was joined by my good friend Daniel Wiley, and we spoke about refining purpose, and in this clip, about how Daniel has redefined his purpose. It was really interesting seeing you, because you've always been this, like I've known you 20 years, you've been so driven and so focused and just powering forward, and then it was just like a little light had gone out.
Yeah.
But like you say, but it was almost like you couldn't comprehend, because you'd done the thing that you said you wanted to do.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you wanted to have that exit, and
it's bringing it all back. Like, yeah. But I find talking to a lot of my friends that have sold businesses and, you know, very opposite to care businesses, they all end up the same after a year.
And what were you going through each day? What were you waking up thinking? What was happening for you to feel that? What was depression like for you?
I don't think at the time you knew you was genuinely depressed. You were just burnt out, gone. My light had gone. And I would say that it's only been recently that I really am back. I really am back to the person that.
It's really interesting. So to bring that to that, there was that you'd sold the business, like you say, monetary wise. You had like lots of good things that come from it. But then you'd had other things that then hadn't gone to plan. So I'm going to use the house for example. So you had. We're going to come back to the business stuff in a minute. So let's just take the house. You had an idea that you wanted to build a dream house, and you embarked on that project.
Yeah.
And you had specced it up. I mean, it is we sat in it right now. It's an absolutely beautiful house in the Essex countryside. And it really is sort of no holes barred in terms of kind of what you did. But you got what percentage of the way through when you then were starting working, doing a full day's work and then coming and working on it?
Oh, from day dot. Because
there was a point where you ran out of money as well, wasn't there? So
I actually ran out of money 3 times.
Right.
Building this.
Yeah.
But I suppose the biggest, the hardest thing during that was just bought this, put my ex-partner on mortgage with me. Obviously I put all the money in. And then we hadn't even got it out of the ground when we decided to split up. And I still had this dream for the house. Like, you know, looking back now, I've just gone, wipe my hands of it, okay, done. But I couldn't give up on the house. I couldn't not finish something I started. And I've never tiled before in my life. I tiled this floor.
Because that's what I want. The reason why I bring it is because obviously you had that feeling of depression, but I get the sense you didn't have that when you were running out of money with the house.
No.
Like you grafted. I mean, since you were a young teenager, you grafted. So it's like, all right, I don't know how to tile, but the floor needs tiling. I'm gonna need to learn how to tile, and the walls need plastering. I don't know how to plaster. So you self-taught yourself all those things. So a lot of people would look at this house from the outside and go, "Kai, he's had it easy." But they don't realise you would work a 12-hour day and then come home and be on your hands and knees tiling the floor and doing those things. But you didn't have that level of depression when that was the case. Why?
Because I had my purpose. I was still going to work every day. I had my routine. I was still going helping people.
Sort of fired you up, right? So then if we then come back to the time when you sold, so not long after you'd sold the business, you were feeling depressed, you had these other businesses, but the light had gone out. Now I refer to having as a North Star, and look, we're friends, you come along, and I said, look, come and sit with me, and we sat down, and that afternoon when we sat down, what changed for you?
you prized out of me the real me, everything that I genuinely wanted, my purpose. And what come out is my purpose is to help people, to care for people. And it took, an hour and a half for it to actually come out of me, because I wasn't sure. I went in there, I'm not sure what's wrong with me. I'm not sure what I want to do. You know, I've done my 10-year plan, that's parked up over there. And I don't think I realised that was what I was missing, that I needed to get back into the care sector, that I've been put on this planet to help people.
And you've helped a lot of people.
And, you know, I owe that to you, mate. I genuinely do. No, I don't think anyone else could have got that out of me.
Thank you for listening to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share it with anybody that you think could benefit from it, and also make sure that you hit subscribe so that you get the new episodes as soon as they're released.